Welcome to This Week in Heresy, episode 31, Radical Sisterhood, with our guest via Skype, Sister Krissy Fiction. Hey, Sister Krissy, welcome to This Week in Heresy.
Hey, thanks. Glad to be here.
So, for those of you who don't know who you are, could you introduce yourself and talk about a little about what you do and where you come from?
Sure. I am Sister Krissy Fiction. I'm the nun that got nailed. I am a fully professed Sister of Perpetual Indulgence and the Prioress, which means the president, of the Order of Benevolent Bliss in Portland, Oregon. So each city that has sisters in it, they have separate houses. And so I am from the Portland house and the president there. And let's see, my road to sisterhood started many, many years ago. I'm actually a former Lutheran minister. I went into ministry in Brazil and San Antonio with a conservative branch of Lutheranism, not the more progressive branch of Lutheranism that many people in the U.S. are familiar with. And left that and kind of moved over to the UCC, United Church of Christ. I was a youth and family minister there, also at a congregation here in Portland, or a suburb of Portland. And concurrent with that, I started investigating kind of Gnosticism and paganism, earth-based stuff. Although I probably wouldn't be considered a polytheist per se, I'm polytheish. So in my practice.
Excellent.
And I think a lot of people probably have seen me at Pantheacon. The sisters did do a ritual last year. For several years now, I've been manifesting as a sister on either Friday or Saturday night and spreading cheer and promulgating joy. So
I've never interviewed a sister of Perpetual Indulgence before.
So you're a virgin.
Yeah.
Exciting.
And I'm wondering what led you into the sisterhood, because I've read other stories, and it's always an interesting story about how people get into the sisters and how they get involved.
Sure. And well, first I should kind of explain who the sisters are as a whole.
Yeah, that'd be great.
We are a 21st century order of queer nuns, and we all take a vow to promulgate universal joy and expiate stigmatic guilt, which are big words. But stigmatic guilt is guilt that's been placed on you from outside sources. So whether it's church, family, society, government, just you name it, we all have messaging from outside ourselves that tells you you're a fag, you're a dyke, you're a slut, whatever it is. I think, everybody gets labeled in some way. And so that we call that stigmatic guilt. And we are here to expiate that by promulgating joy. Of course, promulgate means to announce. And so we are here to let everybody know that you're not defined by the labels that you place on yourself or that other people place on you. You're loved and worth loving just the way you are, period, no exceptions. And we're here to remind you of that every chance we get. And some of the ways that we do that is through safer sex outreach and education. We do a lot of fundraising with other like-minded organizations, HIV and STD prevention groups. Some of the sisters are more politically active. Some we do ritual stuff. We kind of do it all. And a lot of that is directed by individual sisters, too. So we're not a religious organization. We don't have any creed or specific religion. I think that description I just gave you has some spiritual principles to it, but it's not a specific religion. So you have sisters who are Christian, Catholic. You have lots of pagan sisters. You have some sisters that are atheist, don't want anything to do with religion at all. It's just a big, big mix. So anybody can be a sister. But for me personally, that mission does have spiritual components. And the reason that I love being a sister is because it takes my spiritual background. And for me, it's the most direct way that I can put my personal spirituality into action in the community. So it's all about reaching out to the community, being active in the community, but applying my personal spirituality that way. And so, I have that spiritual background. I'm a former minister, and I was pursuing a master's in applied theology. And I saw the sisters it's about 8 years ago now. And I just loved how outrageous it was, that it was all about self-expression and this kind of outward layer of just zaniness and in-your-face activism and self-expression. But underneath that, there's this serious mission of building people up. And one of the sisters always says that we're about fundraising, and some consciousness raising, and sometimes barn raising. Mm-hmm. So I just love that it has all of those elements there together for me, and that's really important for me as a sister.
Well, it also seems a pretty rigorous process too. Like you have, it's, I hate to use the word, but it's not just a parody of an order. It is an order, and it has a lot of the same discipline.
Well, it is, and it's a long process to become a sister. Most houses, and I should say each house is a little different. So we're each our own 501c3. So, but most of the houses, it takes a minimum of a year to become a fully professed sister, and you go through several steps. And like in our house in Portland, I'll just speak for Portland. The first thing that you do is you come to meetings and declare yourself an aspirant, which means you're aspiring, and you come and you hang out with us. You don't put on makeup. You don't get dressed up. You just come and hang out. It's kind of like a dating period. Just want to see if you even are interested in it, or, if it's something that's going to work for you. And then you submit a resume, and you request elevation to become a postulant. And in our house, the postulants wear a black robe and a gray hood. They can put on makeup, but they cannot paint their lips. They focus on their eyes, which is to signify that they're learning and watching and observing and not necessarily speaking at that point. So you're paired up with a couple big sisters, and you kind of follow them around like a little puppy everywhere you go, and listen to them and how they interact. And then after 3 months of that, minimum of 3 months, you would move up to be a novice sister. And in our house, that means you have a black robe and a white bib and scapular. You have a smaller white veil and a small coronet, and you have a little bit more freedom. You can be a little bit farther from your sponsors. You're learning, you can paint your lips because you're learning how to speak for the order and learning how to interact with the public. But that's a minimum of 6 months. And then after that, again, you get voted on to become a fully professed sister. And once you're a fully professed sister, you can dress any way you like, wear any colors you like, speak for the order. You're kind of not an independent agent totally, because we're still a member of an organization, but you're on your own with that. So it is a process. But it's really interesting. You kind of tiptoed around in your question there about whether we're kind of mocking or parodying. And I used to have a really hard time with that. I would always shoot back and say, "Oh, we're not mocking nuns. We're holding them up. We're exemplifying, we're doing the work that they do. We're healing, we're teaching, we're serving our community just like those nuns." And so in that respect, we are emulating them. But I can't deny any longer that there is an element of satire and even mockery to some extent. And that will, I think, piss some people off. And that will be really uncomfortable for a lot of people. But I think that there's an important element that satire plays in society, and it's needed sometimes. And so I think what we're satirizing is the structures and the hierarchy and the organization. And I think even those within the Roman Catholic Church that like us, I think they have a sense of humor and can see that. But there's, we've been approached before. I've been approached by Roman Catholics on the street that don't like what we're doing and are offended by it. And I don't know a total way around that, because I can certainly understand why it'd be offensive, but I do think satire is an important social commentary.
Well, I think it would depend on the nuns that you met too, because I know some Episcopal nuns that live near the mission who are just phenomenal women, and they love you. They think you're the best.
Well, there's lots of Roman Catholic nuns that love us too, but there's others, more conservatives that, do kind of take offense sometimes. And I think that's part of the game when you're going to be doing parody or satire. I mean, you just have to kind of know that biting element is there. And it's partly intentional. It has to be.
Yeah. But I think it's brilliant satire in its wholeness, because you don't.
On a good day.
Yeah, on a good day. I mean, you've got the herding cats aspect, but, any organization, especially benevolent organizations and volunteer organizations, have the herding cat things. I mean, I know I'm starting a church, so, there you go. But I think overall, the mission and direction of the sisters has been brilliant.
Oh, yeah. And I love, too, that it's individually motivated. So, so I'll say this first to start off. Anybody can be a sister. You can be a sister. Anybody listening to this can be a sister. A lot of people think it's limited to gay men, or even gay men with beards. We get that a lot in Portland because, it's the lumber sexual capital of the world. So we all have beards up here.
Right.
But actually anybody, regardless of gender, regardless of sexual orientation, regardless of physical ability, religious background, there's literally zero limitations on who can become a sister. And, the organization, I would say, is still primarily gay men, probably 75%. Might be a little bit less, but there's a lot of cisgender women that are members also. We have trans members. So anybody listening to this can actually go to a local meeting and become a sister and slap on some whiteface eventually.
Awesome.
So, so along with that, those individual sisters bring their own callings to the order. So, the early sisters had their callings, and they did do a lot of kind of, it was very counterculture, fight the man, activism. And as the AIDS crisis hit, it kind of turned into more safer sex outreach and education. Here in Portland, we do a lot of fundraising events. But really, if you have a vision for how to reach out to the community, especially the queer community, but not exclusively, then there's a place for you in the sisters. And our job is to kind of come alongside you with whatever that vision is. So I think there's a lot of freedom in that mission to take the sisterhood wherever you want it to be.
Mm-hmm. So speaking of that, what was your calling?
What was my calling? That's a good question. I think that as a nun, I always take to heart exactly what I told you earlier about a promulgation of universal joy. I actually bring a lot of my Christian background, even though I identify as pagan and Gnostic. I still bring a lot of my more conservative Christian background to it, in a sense, in that I do credit my early conservative Christianity to being where I learned about agape love and universal love and that total acceptance. And that really speaks to me as a sister of reaching out to people, no matter who they are, and bringing them into the fold. That's one of my callings. I do enjoy doing fundraising events here too, but I also like the ritual aspect of being a sister. One of the things that I brought to the Portland Sisters was during my novice project, when I was a novice, I brought the veil of shame and remembrance for World AIDS Day. And other sisters have done this in other houses, but we hadn't done it here. And I think in other houses, the veils were kind of not worn. They were like just cloths. But here in Portland, I actually had nuns wearing the white veils. And so what it is two nuns have white veils on. And one is the veil of remembrance. And on that, we write the names. So we go out bar to bar. We go out downtown Portland. We have candles. And we do a walking vigil. We go bar to bar into the community. And as we meet people, we invite them to write the names of people they've lost. especially to HIV/AIDS, but not exclusively, just people who they've lost in the community. And so they add that name to that veil, that sister's veil. And so that name, that veil gathers names as we go throughout the night. And then the other veil is the veil of shame. And on that, we have people write down any name, any word, anything that has been used to shame them in their lives or to hurt them. I mean, and it's actually pretty intense. Like by the end of the night, I usually wear that veil, and it's filled with just, racial slurs, any kind of slur you can imagine against, the trans community, against the gay community. Just, I mean, it's hardcore stuff. And we're symbolically carrying that. And then at the end of the night, we burn it. And we do a short ritual, and we burn it and release that energy. And it's been really, really well received in Portland. It brings a lot of meaning to people that we meet. And so I think that's one of the things, too, that's my calling, is that release of shame, that expiation of stigmatic guilt. Is one of the things that's important to me as a sister.
That's pretty epic, actually, because people really don't stop to, we're not really encouraged to examine that and to release that. We're basically taught that we must have that shame in order to be an appropriate member of society, apparently.
Well, exactly. And it goes back to, like I was saying, about the labels that are put on us. I think we don't always realize, like, all the labels that we carry around with us, and that even that we put on ourselves, that we can be free from and define ourselves.
Absolutely. And I also like the idea of the veil of remembrance, too. And, I've said in a lot of other interviews, we don't have a lot of ways in our current society to publicly mourn, to publicly really express that mourning. We
Absolutely.
have a little bit, but, and that's why I love Samhain so much, is that it gives a chance for people to do that. But, outside of the pagan community, for the most part, people really don't understand that holiday.
Yeah,
so there's really nothing there.
Speaking of Samhain, I've actually, I keep those veils a lot of the times, the veils of remembrance, and we've used those as altar cloths at my covens. I'm part of an Alexandrian coven, and so we'll use those as altar cloths at Samhain, and it's really powerful just seeing those names and remembering those people. Wow. But I agree. I think that's one of the strengths of the pagan community, right, is that we're willing to interact with death a little bit. And not in a big, spooky, scary way, but in a very natural, organic. It's a part of life. It's the flip side of life. It's something that's there, and we're not afraid of interacting with that for the most part. And I think that's one of the things that paganism can bring to the wider culture. To be honest with you.
Oh, I agree.
Is that ability to kind of interact with death?
Oh, absolutely. I'm trying to do that with my own church, which is Wiccan and Christian specifically. Well, pagan-y, Wiccan-y Christian. It's got a more Wiccan flavor than not.
You know what I call that? I call that spiritual slut.
Hey, there we go. I like that.
Just open for everything.
Hey, why not? So it must be really interesting, the mix of traditions within the sisters. And, what is that like? I mean, does it cause conflict, or is it just people accept that people are different traditions?
Sometimes it might cause conflict. I mean, we're an order of really strong opinions and personalities. So there's always that in the mix, right? I mean, that's just like any organization, but sometimes there's some conflicts, but I think for the most part, there's kind of an acceptance of, this is your thing and this is your calling, and we'll kind of support you in that. And, as a sister, you don't have to go to every event. One of the things that's really cool about PantheaCon is I can come down and be with my other sisters who are kind of like-minded and share that same kind of spiritual path or a similar spiritual path, and we can all interact. And that's one of the cool things about the ritual last year, I think, for me, it was a high point for me as a sister, because I was able to really explicitly do an actual pagan ritual with my other sisters, rather than just kind of a spiritual ritual that is kind of pagan, which happens a lot.
Yeah.
Because, we're looking at a wider audience, but at Pantheacon, we have a pagan audience. Mm-hmm. So we were able to do that specifically for that audience. So that was kind of cool. But, and there's some sisters here, even in Portland, who they're not spiritual at all. They're atheists. They're really only interested in doing community outreach and fundraising. And that's cool. That's totally cool. It's not the woo-woo stuff isn't their thing, and that it doesn't have to be their thing. But we all kind of participate in each other's events to some extent and try and support each other in those callings, I think.
So what was the ritual that you did last year?
Last year it was amazing, actually. I can say that even though I was partly putting it on, it was amazing.
I kind of wish I was able to go, but it conflicted with something else. So
I think it was like on Sunday night at 11 o'clock or something. It was ridiculous. It was super late. But it was a goddess ritual. And we had sisters representing the 4 elemental quarters. And then we had 3 sisters who were aspecting different faces of the triple goddess. So we had a sister who was the maiden and the mother, who had a big full belly, and the crone. And basically in the ritual, the mother, as we were doing energy work, dancing, drumming, started to give birth. And in her belly, she had I actually don't know how much it was, but it was a lot. There were all these veils tied together, and they just came streaming out of her belly, basically. And people were just taking it around the room and spinning it around the room. And at the culmination of the ritual, we cut it, and everybody was able to take a piece of the veil home. But it was amazing. I think one of the cool things about that, too, was that we were sisters. So we're, a lot of us are cisgendered gay men, but we were playing the role of the goddess. And during the little monologue that the crone had, who was Sister Lily, she said, "I am a male priestess." And I love that kind of play with gender, that I am a nun. I'm a male who's a nun. And I was able to be a priestess that night. Not a priest, but actually a priestess. And so that part was really cool. And I think that's one of the cool things about being a sister, is that play with gender and being able to kind of take on different aspects and things like that.
Do you get flack for being that gender fluid? Do people, do you either get, trollish stuff, or people outright being like, you can't do that?
No, not usually. If you're by yourself, I think sometimes when you're out individually, because you just look like a really weird clown drag queen, so somebody may not know who you are. But a lot of times we're out in groups, and it's obvious that, hey, there's something kind of going on with this white face and what people, what you look like. But most people I come across are really cool with it. They understand the concept of, I don't know if I can swear on here, but
the podcast,
the concept of gender fuck, and that playing with gender. I don't usually get any flack from it.
What did you think of the recent, in the last few years? Because in the last few years, especially at PeakCon, there's a lot of discussion about gender.
Yes.
And, I don't know how much you know of how much my wife and I caused trouble. I might have caused trouble about that, but because we are kind of troublemakers. But, what do you think of those events and the aftermath of that? Because it seems like the idea of being gender non-conforming or transgender has just been, it just exploded into, hey, being crap to people is not okay.
Well, absolutely. And I am an ally of the trans community, 100%. So the trans community has my support. And I am not trans, so I get to play in that world a little bit as far as the gender nonconforming kind of dress and stuff. But I am a cis male, and so I don't live that experience, and so I obviously can't speak for that community or tell that community how to feel or think, but I can stand beside them. And I'm not sure. I don't know what trouble you guys got into. You specifically. I know that there were the issues with the genetic women only ritual and things like that. And I strongly support people being able to identify for themselves what their own identity is, and have people respect that.
Yeah, we kind of touch that up, especially with the Dianics, the Z Budapestian Dianics, I should be very specific. And if you like to read more about that, you can go to st4r.org, because we have the whole thing in there. You just look under this circle of Caradwin. But basically, it was the idea that from that, it is just what you said, you know, people should be able to identify as they are, to go to rituals where they identify with whatever gender that is being. So basically, like if it's a women's only ritual, then anyone who identifies with that gender identity should be able to go.
I agree. And I think there's a difference between public and private space. And in public spaces like Pantheacon, with the public rituals, I know that there are private rituals and rooms and things like that, but the public rituals that are listed in the program, I really think that, yeah, people should be able to self-identify. I mean, I don't have a problem with saying this ritual is geared towards women, or this ritual is geared towards men, or this presentation, or it's geared towards this or that. But I think people should be able to self-identify and attend as they want. I don't have a problem with finding your own space for your own mysteries at times. I think that can be helpful. I'm actually taking classes in the Unnamed Path, which is a tradition for men who love men. And so in some senses, I guess that's exclusive. It's focusing on one aspect, but I think there are places and times for doing that. I think it's okay to have trans space. I think it's okay to have women only space. I think it's okay to have those, only spaces. But I think at some point we need to come back together as a community. And places like Pantheacon is where we do that. And I think the rituals are the places that we do that. So I think there needs to be allowance for that. And it seems like there is now, or more and more. I think they changed their policy a year or two ago.
Right.
So, and that's good. I mean, people spoke out, and I loved that a few years ago, the kind of political action that took place in the hallway. I was there as a sister along, I think, Thorncoil, right. Kind of headed that up, but it was really moving. And it was really powerful to see so many people stand there in support of that. And I think it's great. And I think it's great that Pantheacon has heard those voices. So all positive stuff.
I think so, too. And I think it's been quite an evolution in gender issues in the last few years, societally. Is that a word?
Oh, yeah.
It seems to have exploded.
I think, too, as especially cisgender gay men and lesbians are gaining more equality and I would say privilege, that, it shines a light on those segments of our community that are not experiencing the same thing. And I do suffer some discrimination as a gay man, but I would say also that as a white cisgender gay man, I experience a lot of privilege too. And I think it makes me aware that there are other segments of our community that are not there yet. And I think that we need to bring them along with us instead of just being like, oh yeah, hey, I made it. I can walk down the street now with my male partner and hold hands and use the word tranny without feeling any guilt about it. That's not comfortable for me. I think, equality belongs to all people, and I don't I don't want to feel like I'm leaving anybody behind personally.
Right. And, you know, there's also the intersections of race, which is now becoming more talked about in specifically at Pantheacon, but in the pagan community as a whole. And I think it's really fascinating how all these intersections are now coming together. And I think it's really great. I just hope we don't get bogged down in our own internal, like, this is my thought and I'm right, you know, and that internal argumentativeness.
Yeah, that's a hard one. I think that's a quality that people struggle with, regardless of conservative or liberal or wherever you're at. I think we all kind of sometimes find it hard to step outside of our own paradigm, whatever it is, whether we're on the left or the right or where we're at, and see another person's point of view and acknowledge another person's experience. I think that's really hard. I don't always get it. You know, I think I have my own internal dialogues. I'll hear somebody say something and I'm like, I don't understand this, or this doesn't make sense to me, or I don't like this. But then I have to remind myself that it's not my place to understand it necessarily, or like it, or agree that that's not my experience. I'm not a person of color. I'm not a trans person, you know, and we have to allow space for them to tell their stories and for us to listen. I feel that that's my big job as an ally, is to listen.
Right. But I think you're also doing, you know, considering that you are a sister and you do the public actions, I think you're helping a lot as an ally just doing that, you know?
Yeah, some of us are. I mean, I'm not going to lie. You know, everything I'm saying here, I'm kind of saying as an individual sister. This is my point of view. I'm not saying that all sisters share my exact same points of views on everything. And we have our own internal dialogues that are going on in the houses and in the sisters as a whole. I know that I'll say here in Portland, there was, especially a couple years ago, we had a big discussion in our house about trans issues. There's a very large trans community here in Portland, and not everybody in the sisters was on the same page, and that was a big discussion. So, you know, I don't feel like I'm airing dirty laundry with that. That's just a reality, but that's probably not a side that the public sees a lot. I think the same thing is going on in the wider sister community. With sisters of color, people of color, but sisters of color, and what their experiences are. And, you know, I think as a sisterhood, if we are going to continue to be that activist voice and not just become the token clown nuns at fundraisers and door greeters, I think that we are going to need to diversify personally and grow. Because there is a bit of that, you know, when we first started off, it's been lots and lots of years now, 35 years. It started in 1979. And, you know, like I said earlier, when the sisters started, it was very counterculture, fight the man, activism. And over the years, we've organized. We're now a 501c3 nonprofit. We have rules we have to follow. We have laws we have to obey. We're an organization. You know, we run our meetings with Robert's Rules of Order, and people have to follow these certain rules. And it's really hard. There's always that tension between becoming too mainstream or too kind of just, I don't know what the word is, but just organized, too stale. There's that tension with the other side of the self-expression and the activism, and how do we keep thriving and changing and diversifying.
Well, I think it's a good conversation to have. And I also think that's the conversation happening in the pagan community, too, is, you know, a lot of, you know, paganism is becoming mainstream-ish.
Yeah.
You know, and
it's growing.
Yeah. And so we're getting more fights about theology these days than, you know, trying to make sure that we're visible. And I think that's really fascinating. But I think having the discussions, all of these kinds of discussions, whether it's within the sisters or within the pagan community as a whole, or just, you know, progressive spirituality stuff as a whole, I think it's been really, really good. It's been much more out there and open.
Yeah, I have a friend who once said, and you can tell me if you think this is correct or incorrect or not, but he kind of said, if you look at the pagan community or the neo-pagan community, really, I mean, when it started to kind of rise to prominence or become more out there was the 50s, 60s, 70s, right? So how many years in are we? We're like about maybe 50 years in, 60 years in. And right. If you look at even early Christianity, the first 50, 60 years and what was going on there, kind of defining themselves as a community, defining their theology. Who is Jesus? What did it mean? What he did? What did his death mean? What did his life mean? All these things, right? And eventually kind of coming to a unified theology. I think he was saying, like, you can kind of draw a parallel there and say you can see that evolution. Like we're here about 50, 60 years in, and we're trying to figure out, well, what does pagan mean? What's the difference between pagan and polytheist, and why does it matter? And what's the meaning of all this, and all that stuff.
Right. Well, it becomes a very fascinating discussion because on one hand there's the spontaneous anarchist type side of paganism that, there's many people that are just kind of like, no, let's not have these discussions. We're all pagans, blah, let's all do it. And then, they're really, people serious about the academic recognition of paganism.
See, and I feel like I kind of walk between those worlds a little bit. I like that kind of free form ecstatic expression, but I'm also kind of a history geek and a religion geek and a scholar geek, and I appreciate all that aspect also. So I hear the brunt of both conversations sometimes from both sides. I run in some, I'm a member of the Ecclesia Antinous, and so Pisu Finis Virius Lupus is that organization, and he's kind of an outspoken polytheist. And so I have his ear, or he has my ear. And so I hear those things. But I'm also a member of a Wiccan coven, and I participate in a Gnostic church body sometimes. So, I hear all those elements, and I hear what's going on.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, I'm walking both the Christian and the Wiccan, and it's really fascinating because especially when I was in seminary, I would get my seminary classes during the week, and then I would also see the discussions online and with the pagans who were either at seminary doing that kind of work or just in the community at large. And it's really fascinating kind of being in the middle ground.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
It's just really interesting to see how they're merging, and how the pagan side of the street is starting to come up into that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've always said that I believe that liberal or progressive Christianity has much more in common with neo-paganism than it does with its the fundamentalist or conservative branch of its own religion. I've always said that. I think the UCC and my Wiccan coven, we get along a lot greater than members of the UCC church I've attended and maybe some other conservative group would, right. So I think we tend to wear these outer clothes a lot of like, this is, again, we get back to those labels of what is Christian, what is pagan. And those are kind of external labels, but underneath it all, the theology and the spirituality is really what's important. And I think a lot of times once you take those clothes off, you'll find some really interesting stuff about what's really going on underneath that.
And a much more commonality than people seem to think as well. For sure. It doesn't seem to me anyway that, there's difference of theology, sure, but the underlying values are the same, I think.
Well, I think the values of like neo-paganism and paganism in general and like progressive Christianity are ones of openness, inclusion, not allowing people to kind of explore their own truth, allowing truth to be individual, and which is the opposite, I think, of fundamentalism, which says there is only one truth and I have it. and everybody else is wrong, and there's no other way to do things. And so, I mean, you see that also though in paganism. There's I would consider fundamentalist pagans in a sense. I think anytime,
yep,
anytime you slip into that, this is the only way to do it. Only I'm right. I think you get into dangerous territory. So I always try and say, that I support anything that's open, inclusive, accepting. I don't care what it's called on the outside. I'm looking at principles and values, which means sometimes I make other liberals angry too, because I'll call them out on their stuff too, if I feel that they aren't acting consistent with those principles and standing their ground too much. So,
I get into those too. Sometimes it's a little much, though, especially on Facebook. But then again, Facebook is problematic with these discussions sometimes.
It is. It's sometimes I have to say I'm a bit of a troll on Facebook. Sometimes I go onto conservative sites. Everybody needs a hobby.
That's awesome.
But I'm not sure what it always accomplishes, because it's so easy just to type out a message and hit send. And I don't know that even these people that are saying these horrible things would really say them face to face in person. I'm sure some of them would, but I think a lot of people just are, it's like no filter, you just kind of can say the most cruel thing and hit send, and then it's just out there. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just out there in the digital world.
Yep. And the digital world is forever.
Exactly. Just like glitter.
Right? So what do you see as the future of the sisters? Do you think it's going to become even bigger, the organization?
Well, we are growing. So when I started as a sister just 8 years ago, I would say that was a start of a little growth spurt in a lot of houses. Previously, for many, many years, there were mostly houses on the West Coast. Not exclusively, but, mostly West Coast, Seattle, Los Angeles, San Francisco. There's kind of a rogue order in New York.
That's not surprising.
There were a few sisters kind of spaced out in the Midwest, here and there. And then they started adding orders like really quickly. And now it's all over the country. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's houses in Louisville, Kentucky. There's a house in Alabama. There's houses in Southern Florida. I mean, there's just Milwaukee, Wisconsin has a house. Minnesota has a house. It's all over. So it's definitely growing and expanding. I would like to see our ability, this is just me personally, our ability to include a wider spectrum of people in the sisters. I think if we're going to continue to be relevant and not just, growing, but actually relevant, I think we need to include all those voices that's in our community. And I'd love to see that.
That would be really cool. So, I know you mentioned to me before we got on that you're going to be at PantheaCon, but you did mention that the sisters are not doing a ritual this year.
We are not. Like you mentioned herding cats before. It was a little herding cats this year. There was just it was hard getting commitments from everybody. And then a lot of people started having some people had financial difficulties and, all sorts of stuff last minute. Yeah. And so finally they just said, well, let's maybe do it next year. So we're going to do that. I am still going to be there. Sister Krissy will be there. Sister Show Me the Goods will be there. And I know some other sisters will be there. I'm not sure if they're going to manifest with us, but at least a few of us will be out on Saturday night. We'll probably hit the room parties and have bliss kits with us. So bliss kits are safer sex packets.
Excellent.
So we'll be passing those out and spreading joy. And I really, I love doing that every year at PantheaCon and being able to just kind of get into that community. Mm-hmm. And just spread that joy and interact with people and spread that message of love. So we'll be there, but it just looks like there won't be an organized ritual this year.
Well, that's cool. You should definitely come and swing by our suite, room 966, the upstairs neighbor of the beast.
For sure. We will be there.
It's kind of crazy when the season comes around. So, with that, we're out of time.
Oh, it goes so fast.
I know it does. So, if people would like to get in touch with you to ask you questions or ask you about the sisters, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
I am, you can email me at sisterkrissy@gmail.com. That's sisterkrissy@gmail.com. I am on Twitter at Sister Krissy is my Twitter handle, and I'm going to get it all wrong. I do have a blog that I'm going to be relaunching very soon. I've been awful with my blog writing, but I'm going to be relaunching that, and that's called Promulgate This.
Okay.
So it's promulgatethis.wordpress.com.
Excellent. Well, we will have that all in the show notes, and make sure that everybody is able to get to your blog as well.
Yeah, and if you're interested in the sisters at all, you can go to thesisters.org, and that's the main San Francisco site. And I think they have links to individual houses. So for the sisters, just thesisters.org.
The sisters, all one word.
Yes.
Okay. Excellent. Well, we'll put that in the show notes as well. So, Sister Krissy, thank you so much for being on This Week in Heresy.
Yes, thank you. It was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Was. All right. Thanks.
All right. Have a good one.
I'd like to thank Sister Krissy for joining us this week. As always, if you have comments, questions, or would like to read the show notes, you can go to thisweekinheresy.com. You can support This Week in Heresy by subscribing to the show via iTunes or the Stitcher app, following us on Twitter at TWIH Podcast, or financially through Patreon. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.